I love when it's time to put my kids to bed. Not just for the obvious reason of being able to take a breath and enjoy what has become the parents' version of date night. At our house, that's a glass of wine, Top Chef, another glass of wine, and passing out in tandem on the couch. No, I love putting my kids to bed because I know it's fleeting. My boys will not always need my presence in order to feel safe and fall asleep. They'll grow out of bottles and stories and me tickling their faces softly until their eyes close. Someday they'll trot off to bed of their own accord, which will be wonderful in its own right, but for now, I love the weight of a sleeping toddler on my chest. I love cuddling my oldest and hearing about his day and all of the weird little boy things he's curious about. We've had some of our best conversations right before he falls asleep. I crossed a parenting milestone one evening when my son Jude, then 4 years old, asked me if everyone dies. He'd been hearing the word a lot lately. My grandpa and uncle had both recently passed. We had also just started keeping chickens, and in a monumental blunder on my part, 5 of the baby chicks had died. So there we were, nose to nose, cuddled in the blue glow of the nightlight, and Jude asking point blank, "Does everyone die?" This is one of those moments when the world stops and you know your answer will have lasting effect. I am about to shape my child's first impression of death. "Yes, buddy," I say, "everyone dies." For the rest of my life, I will remember his sweet face crumpling as he says in a tiny voice, "Oh no, even me?" My heart shatters. I want to say, no, not you, never you. By the time you get old, they'll find a cure for death, and you and me and Daddy and Aiden and your granny and grandpa and all of your family will be together always. I want to cure death so that it doesn't keep my son up at night. I want to avoid the upcoming trips in the car when he is at his most open, during which he'll ask if his best friend Sammy will die. As endearing as it is, I don't want to be present when he asks if Barack Obama will die, and then upon hearing my affirmative answer sobs out, "But he's my favorite president." This is when other parents are able to turn to heaven and let their children know that if they're good and go to church and say their prayers, then after they die, a loving God will welcome them to paradise and they'll all live happily ever after, amen. I want heaven to be real now, just as I wanted it to be real at my grandpa's funeral when my Mormon family members spoke of my grandparents being reunited in heaven and dancing together for eternity. It is a beautiful, comforting image to hold on to, and I want to be able to tell my child this story too. I want to believe, but I don't. The best I can do is save my son from the devastation of growing up and thinking that I lied to him in this moment when he needed me most. His analytical mind will most certainly view the Santa Claus myth as a betrayal someday, so I step away from the temptation of the story that I know will stop his crying, and I carefully revisit the narrative that began a few days earlier with the death of our first chick. When we die, I tell him, our bodies turn to dust. This dust then turns into dirt, and the dirt becomes a tree or grass. Our bodies help new things grow. He asks if my grandpa has turned into a fruit tree, and I feel no qualms with skipping over the blasphemy of caskets and embalming and tell him yes. Grandpa Cyril is a fruit tree, probably apple. For the moment, this calms him, and he sleeps. The conversation does not end there. We revisit the topic every few weeks, then every few months, but it doesn't go away. We're always in bed, snuggled together after a book right before he falls asleep. Death sneaks into the conversation. Every time it catches me off guard, and yet every time I field the questions with a little more confidence than I did the time before. In classic Jude fashion, he has declared the circle of life dumb. But I feel my shoulders release just a fraction when he tells me that even though he hates dying, he loves that he will become a tree. I love it too. I realize that talking through death with Jude, enlightening him on this grander scheme of decay and renewal, makes me more comfortable with the idea as well. I hold Jude tighter, and I promise him that as he gets used to the idea of dying, it won't seem so scary, and he won't think about it as much. I also promise that I'll do my best years and years and years from now to make sure that my tree is planted next to his tree and that our leaves will always be touching. It's a picture that we both need to hold on to as we finally fall asleep. Thank you.